Welcome everybody to the speaker series, Speaking Up for Point Molotai, in which invited speakers address key questions and issues about Point Molotai, and members of the public can ask questions. We honor the Ohlone people for whom this area is home and who were traditional stewards of this land. The Ohlone live among us now, and they merit our respect and acknowledgement of their culture and their ancestors. For a quick overview, the speakers will present for around 40 minutes, and then we'll answer questions. Please limit questions to 1 minute. We invite sincere questions asked with courtesy and respect. Inappropriate behavior will cause removal from the meeting. Because so many people are expected to attend today, we have disabled the chat for this session only. If you would like to see the recording of this session or other sessions, the easiest thing to do is go to the Speaking Up YouTube channel, which ordinarily I would post the link in the chat, but that's just not possible today. And let me also mention that next Monday, Jim Hansen will be the featured speaker, and I don't have an official title for his presentation, but I'm sure he will be talking about plant life at Point Molotai. I'm Sally Tobin, co-founder with Pam Stello of this speaker series. I'm a biologist and a retiree of the Stanford Center for Biomedical Ethics. I work with the Point Molotai Alliance and the Richmond Shoreline Alliance, and I'm a member of the Bay Area Sea Kayakers, which is how I got to know Point Molotai in the first place. I serve on the board of citizens for Eastshore Parks and live in Richmond. Pam Stello is co-chair of the Point Molotai Alliance and the Richmond Shoreline Alliance and serves on the board of citizens for Eastshore Parks. She lives in Richmond. Please wave Pam. Our Zoom administrator is Dani Zacky, who is the Bay and Shoreline organizer for the San Francisco Bay chapter of the Sierra Club. Please wave Dani. This week, we are very pleased to present two outstanding speakers who will have a conversation with each other, followed by questions from the members of the audience. Contra Costa County Supervisor John Gioia grew up in Richmond and was inspired to public service by his father, a popular civics and history teacher at Richmond's Kennedy High School. John is a recognized leader in Bay Area regional government and air quality and climate change issues, having served on the California Air Resources Board and currently serving on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District Board. He has helped lead efforts to pass the strongest laws in the nation to clean our air and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. John has served on the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission since 1999, where he's voted to protect San Francisco Bay and expand public access to the shoreline. As vice chair of the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, he helped lead a successful campaign to raise $500 million for San Francisco Bay. For over 30 years, John has built coalitions to address vital issues such as environmental justice, access to healthcare, criminal justice reform, air and water quality, protection of San Francisco Bay, expanding opportunities for our youth, and health and equity for all. He was just re-elected to a 7th term on the Board of Supervisors with 85% of the vote. Our other eminent speaker is Norman LaForce, who is legal chair for the San Francisco Bay chapter of the Sierra Club. Norman has worked on San Francisco environmental and land management issues for over 25 years and led the campaign to create what is now Sylvia McLaughlin Eastshore State Park. He has written a detailed history of the successful project entitled Creating the Eastshore State Park, an Activist History. In 2004, the Sierra Club honored him with its prestigious William Penn Mott Award, which is given to a Californian who has made an outstanding contribution to protecting and improving California's state parks. Norman is Vice President and a founding member of Citizens for Eastshore Parks and is President of SprawlDef, the Sustainability, Parks, Recycling, and Wildlife Legal Defense Fund. They will have a conversation entitled The History of Fighting for Open Space in the Bay Area. So here are John Gioia and Norman LaForce.
Thanks, Sally, and thank you everybody for joining us. And Norman and I are looking forward to talking about this important issue and then hearing some questions. And I noticed that each of us have great open space backgrounds behind us. I actually have one of my favorite places up on Nickel Knob in the Miller Knox Regional Shoreline, where we look out on San Francisco Bay. And Norman Norman, where are you? What's behind you? Oh, yep, you're muted. I think you're muted, Norman.
Unmute the two. This is a picture of the Serpentine Prairie in March. The Serpentine Prairie is part of the now what's called the Dr. Oriella Reinhardt Redwood Regional Park. Dr. Oriella Reinhardt, I'm sorry, was one of the founding people for the East Bay Regional Park District. She was supposed to be honored some point along the line with a name for a park, but all the women here will understand why somehow she got forgotten in history but she is now remembered, and the Park District has renamed Redwood Regional Park for her. She was instrumental in creating the East Bay Regional Park District. Great.
So, I mean, in a way, our backgrounds define what makes the Bay Area such a wonderful place. And we thought this subject of putting, when there's a battle for open space, like what's happening in Richmond with Point Melati, I think it's important to put it in the perspective of what's happened around the Bay, what have been the successful battles, because I think it's easy to look around and just believe that the open space happened, and it didn't. In fact, there's a book that I occasionally pick up and read. It's called The Country in the City. Great book, The Greening of the San Francisco Bay Area. And it's sort of academically written. It's from UC Press, but it really goes into a lot of the battles of how we've achieved our open space here in the Bay Area. And the fact that here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have really more publicly dedicated open space in our urban areas than any other urban part of the country wasn't by accident. And there's a great quote in this book that I like to quote. And that quote is that every park, reserve, and trail required money, mobilization, lobbying, and electoral pressure. In short, the Greenbelt is not a natural product of social progress and dawning enlightenment, but something that has been won through decades of effort. And we've had amazing leaders in the Bay Area, including right here in Richmond over the years, whose work has allowed us to enjoy amazing open space, especially along the Bay. And I think it is so important for those of us from urban communities like Richmond to say we deserve the same type of open space for everyone to enjoy as those more suburban and rural parts of the Bay Area. And I wanted to speak generally on two big movements. We're going to show a 2-minute clip from a TV show, talk more, and Norman's going to talk about some specific battles. But I want us to sort of think bold and visionary. And we planned this talk before this announcement today about state dollars, which we will mention after the video and talk a little bit about. But ultimately, I think the speaker series is going to have a program just on a pathway forward on Point Melati. We'll make some references to that and maybe have our Park District Director, Elizabeth Eccles, on, who's been great, and hear from her as well on this. Because I think it is really important to note that what's happening here in Richmond with Point Melati isn't just Richmond. It's a broader battle and a broader issue that could benefit all Richmond residents. I've had the privilege of serving on the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission since 1999. And I think a lot of people may not realize its history, that it was formed originally because three amazing women in the East Bay helped form Save San Francisco Bay Association, because cities around the Bay were filling in the Bay for housing and other kinds of things. And in the interest of protecting our Bay as a regional resource, led to the passage of a state law that created the first agency in the United States that had land use powers over a city and county land within its zone. So everything on the Bay and the 100-foot shoreline, and that includes the 100-foot shoreline of Point Melati, are within the jurisdiction of the Bay Conservation Development Commission. And what environmental leaders will say, and I think this is borne out, had BCDC not been formed, the Bay would have been filled in more and would have become smaller. And at the time it was formed, it was this idea of a bay or a river, because cities like even Berkeley at the time were filling the Bay. And so this state agency of federal, state, and local officials was formed, and it created what's also called a San Francisco Bay Plan that specifies land use around the Bay on the shoreline. There's a great PBS documentary narrated by Robert Redford that goes into the history of San Francisco Bay, and they devoted a whole hour to the efforts of these three amazing women to form Save the Bay and eventually BCDC. And the Coastal Commission has been modeled after BCDC. I also have had a chance to serve on the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority as its vice chair, which put on the ballot back in 2016 a pretty historic measure that raises $500 million for San Francisco Bay public access, wetlands restoration. And we received 70% of the vote of Bay Area residents. Think about that, 70% voted to tax themselves in a parcel tax for the Bay, even people who didn't live near the Bay. And to create opportunities for access on the shoreline, for wetland restoration, to improve the Bay. So we have Doug McConnell on Open Road did a half-hour episode to sort of look at where we were with that. So we thought we'd be inspired when we see a regional movement like that. So we have like a 2-minute clip from that in which we talk about, and he talks about that. So I thought we would start with that 2-minute clip. Oh, no volume. I don't think there's volume. I think you have I don't think there's volume, right?
San Francisco Bay, the namesake and centerpiece of our beautiful Bay Area. Those of us who live here today love the Bay and having easy access to it, and may not remember we nearly destroyed it in the decades after the gold rush. By the mid-20th century, filling in about 90% of its precious and vital wetlands and defiling the shoreline and water quality with human waste and toxic pollutants. AA was really historic for the Bay Area. In a truly historic vote in 2016, Bay Area residents overwhelmingly passed Measure AA, taxing themselves to raise $500 million over 20 years to clean the Bay's water, prevent pollution, and restore bayshore wetlands. 70% of the voters in the Bay Area voted to invest in making San Francisco Bay cleaner and wetland restoration. Here's an area that was diked, and the levee now has been breached. We're bringing life back here. We're bringing habitat back. We're bringing the Bay back. John Gioia is a longtime Contra Costa County Supervisor and Vice Chair of the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, the public agency responsible for allocating Measure AA funds for shoreline projects like this one to protect, restore, and enhance the bay. And just to see this and all the hard work that's gone into this makes me feel proud that the Bay Area has really invested in this. One of the primary goals of Measure AA is to restore and revitalize the Bay shoreline in an equitable way to ensure all communities benefit, including those that have long been ignored. We wanted to make sure that every part of the Bay Area, urban, suburban, or rural, had good wetland restoration project. A smaller project in Hunters Point in San Francisco is just as important as a large project in the North Bay or the South Bay. Once again, the Bay Area is leading the nation in urban environmental conservation, restoration, and public engagement by the implementation of Measure AA and the progress we've made so far, and our unprecedented decision region-wide to restore and revitalize as much of its shoreline as we can, as fast as we can, and as equitably as we must.
Great. So I think that gives us really optimism and hope about how big, bold things can be achieved. And oftentimes I think we get caught up in our battles. And I'll say this after someone who's grown up in Richmond and represented this great community for many years, is that people end up supporting or opposing an idea because they liked or didn't like who came up with the idea. How crazy is that? I mean, I think what the public wants us to do is look at the underlying merits of an issue, of a project, and support it on the merits, not who's behind it. I've heard so much discussion about, well, gee, these folks are behind it, we don't like it. Come on, folks. The public wants us to do the right thing, which is to look at the underlying merits. And then if we disagree, have a discussion about that. And so, you know, and that has happened in a number of other areas where there's been open space battles. And before I get into the conversation with Norman, I want to mention what got announced today, because I think it's significant. And one of the things you'll hear is these open space battles take years. Sometimes progress is incremental, and that things happen slowly. So today, it was announced that, and really this is due to the amazing leadership of our state senator, Nancy Skinner, who used to be on our representative on the East Bay Regional Park District Board. She's also the chair of the state Senate's budget committee. So she has enormous power. So the state budget that was approved for this year allocates specifically $36 million to the East Bay Regional Park District to help create a vision of a regional park at Point Melati. And the East Bay Regional Park District's master plan from the late 90s has always identified this area as a regional park. The Bay Conservation and Development Commission's San Francisco Bay Plan identifies that as well. But back in, I think it was 2008, 71% of East Bay voters and 75% of voters in Richmond approved the Park District's Measure WW that allocates actually a little over $4 million to a regional shoreline park at Point Melati. So voters have actually weighed in and approved an investment of money, 75% of Richmond voters out at Point Melati. So Senator Skinner really did lead efforts, working with her colleagues and working with our Park District Director, Elizabeth Eccles, and was able to allocate specifically the $36 million and worked with the governor and signed and supported by Governor Newsom. And I think that is a big deal. It shows that this effort to create a regional park at Point Melati has the support of our state, of state leaders, as well as the Park District. Is that enough? No, that money will leverage millions more to help achieve the goal. All of these battles are, as I said, are incremental and happen at a time. So this $36 million is an amazing, great start. And we can talk more on what is a pathway on that. And again, this show wasn't designed to deal with that, but you know, we can talk about it later in the questions. But I wanted to at least explain what that action was. And it puts the Park District in a position to be able to work with the eventual landowner to purchase the property for a regional park. And much of the, and Norman can talk about this, much of the open space that we have and we enjoy in the Bay Area was purchased from private property owners and became public. With that, Norman, you've been involved with a number of the efforts here in the East Bay. And I think one that we're pretty familiar with is Eastshore State Park, right? Which has those amazing soccer fields in Berkeley, Albany, has has the bike trail, has other amenities. Can you talk a bit about that? Obviously, you'll have other comments you may want to make beforehand, but since you're a veteran of these, but about how that occurred, how we were able to enjoy that open space along the East Bay shoreline.
No, I appreciate being here today to talk about this topic because it's really very important. What's now called the McLaughlin Eastshore State Park, and it's really interesting to John when you referenced the three founders of Save the Bay, because the McLaughlin Eastshore State Park was actually the genesis, so to speak, of Save the Bay. Sylvia McLaughlin spoke how she would look out her window from the hills of Berkeley and see the filling of the bay at the what's now called the Berkeley Meadow, the Berkeley Marina, and was appalled. And not only began with her co-founders, Kay Kerr and Esther Gulick, and she always wanted to make sure that it was the three women that were always given equal acknowledgement, created Save the Bay, but also to work to create a open space park on the shoreline of the East Bay, which ultimately became the McLaughlin Eastshore State Park. And that was an effort that included mobilizing, as you've termed, mobilizing the community on the issue and working with the state, with representatives, elected representatives, both in the city of Berkeley, city of Albany, even city of Richmond, city of Emeryville, and also state legislators. Tom Bates was actually one of the principal who helped create the McLaughlin Eastshore State Park through his efforts over the years, along with Bob Campbell. I think many people in West County will remember our dear leader, Bob Campbell. And in addition, it required the work of agencies like the East Bay Regional Park District, okay, which was critical to this. And one component of that that is often forgotten by people is that the East Bay Regional Park District for a long time did not have a lot of money for acquisition. Between its creation in 1933, which in the midst of the Depression was a tax to create the East Bay Regional Park District, up until approximately 1988, did not have a lot of money for acquisition. In 1988, it put on the ballot what was called Measure AA, another AA, which was the first bond measure for the Park District to purposely for acquisition of parkland. That was followed in 2016 with Measure 2018 with Measure WW. And because of those two bond measures, which were overwhelmingly supported by the electorate in the East Bay, the Park District went from something like 20,000 acres to now over 120,000 acres of parkland and open space in the East Bay. And it was that combined strategy of working with elected officials, with the community involvement, and with the agencies like the East Bay Regional Park District that made it possible to create the McLaughlin Eastshore State Park. That was absolutely critical. It's that working together of all the different components that made this possible. Part of that strategy is also legal, but the legal component often has to be combined with the political mobilization and with working with agencies to work to save parkland. A good example of that is the Tesla, what's called Tesla Park or Kyle Hollow, some of us refer to it, which was formerly the off-road vehicle park that was slated for Cow Hollow, what's called Tesla Park in eastern Alameda County. That was a 40 some odd year campaign battle to save that pristine area from being overrun by off-road vehicles. And that was a combination of legal lawsuits against the state parks off-road vehicle administration to destroy that area, along with finally legislation that provided funding and transfer of that area from the off-road vehicle section of the state parks to become a true state park. So that's a good example of how you work together on all these issues. It's absolutely critical to work all this together in creating the parklands and open space that we have today.
Norman, just to shift up to the North Richmond shoreline.
Sure.
Many folks remember Whitney Dotson from Parchester Village, who was our representative on the Park District Board for a number of years, but did most of his great advocacy before he got on the park board and really led to all that wonderful land we enjoy up near between Point Pinole and Richmond, the Bruner Marsh. I know you've been involved, we're familiar with that. I mean, that was a struggle as well, even with the city of Richmond at that time.
Right, and they're part of what happened there too is that because of the importance of now the Dotson family marsh for the bay in terms of environmental values and open space values, the Park District took on an eminent domain action with regard to that property. Eminent domain is very rarely used by the agencies. State parks, in fact, as said, it will never use eminent domain to acquire parkland. Maybe that'll change sometime. The East Bay Regional Park District, to its credit, has used that on occasion and done so successfully. And in that case with the Dotson family marsh, it was clear that they had to carry out the eminent domain action because the property owner, a car, just simply refused to agree to a transfer or sale of the property. And it was that marshland was too important to allow anything to happen to that marshland. And so that was done there. And that was critical, particularly because of the legacy of the Dotson family with regard to that marshland. Another area where the Park District actually used eminent domain was to acquire property along the shoreline between Berkeley and Richmond for the last leg of the Bay Trail in Albany, and that was an eminent domain action against the Golden Gate Fields racetrack, which was just refused to even consider allowing a Bay Trail along its western edge of the property. And that was very successful as an eminent domain action. The Golden Gate Fields actually took a beating on that because they simply refused to agree to a reasonable sum. But those are the kinds of actions and leadership that is needed and is carried out when people want something, because it was clear to the Park District that people wanted the completion of that portion of the Bay Trail. And it was a very important link. And I think a lot of people on this program here tonight, I think have gone along that area, and they've done a great job in creating completing that section of the Bay Trail.
Yeah, and we've had, of course, our own, great heroes and here in Richmond with Lucretia Edwards, Barbara and Jay Vincent. There's parks named after them at Marina Bay, and who worked to create some of the property over at Miller Knox and Nickel Knob, the area behind me, actually, Lucretia Edwards, a large part of that, and some of the lawsuits that were brought against developers way back in the 1980s along the Richmond shoreline to create the park areas. Of course, BCDC requires public access and the Bay Trail, but the ability to have parks and places for people to go, that came out of litigation that occurred decades ago against those who were developing along the Richmond shoreline. And I think we forget that it didn't come from just agreeing to a plan that was laid out. It came with citizen activism. And one of the things I get asked is, so what would be at a Point Mulate Regional Park? I think sometimes people think, oh, it's only passive use. Really, what would occur at a Point Mulate Regional Park is really up to the community in a transparent way. What the Park District would do, if the Park District, I'll just lay this out, were successful in purchasing the property with funding that it would receive, it would go through a community process to understand what is the greater Richmond and East Bay community want to see there. You know, along Eastshore State Park, the soccer fields were an important part of it. I've heard a lot of call for more soccer fields in the Richmond area, since there's a shortage. In fact, some of the soccer teams play some of their games at the Tom Bates Sports Field over in Berkeley and Albany at Eastshore State Park. So, I mean, having the community be involved is so important. Not having the developer really guide the plan, but having the community. That is the advantage of public ownership, right? The advantage of public ownership with the Park District, where we get to elect the directors. They're accountable to us. Elizabeth Eccles is accountable to us. She and her colleagues would want to hear, what does this community want to see at a larger Point Mulate Regional Park? So I just wanted to answer that, because I think that's a question that I hear a lot about. I know, Norman, your other thoughts about community process on some of these other battles.
Well, I think that highlights, again, another aspect of the McLaughlin Eastshore State Park, which was, I remember when I first became involved with that in the 1980s, a number of people came and said, well, I want to have this at the park, and I want to have this at the park. And I said, wait a minute, first we got to get the land saved as parkland, and then we can plan it after that. And there may be things I wanted to see there, but that had to go through a process. And actually they went through a very elaborate process. I remember one meeting at his lordship's restaurant, where we had probably 300 people show up to plan the McLaughlin, what became the McLaughlin Eastshore State Park. And yes, John, that's one of the critical aspects of this, is that through an agency like the East Bay Regional Park District, the community at this level can have direct input on what should happen and what should be the plan for the park. And that's very critical, because it's always, anything we do to save park and open space is really community driven, by people in the community saying, this is what we want, and these are the elected leaders we want to see carrying that out.
Right, right. You know, the other thing I do want to point out is that, you know, often sort of taking it back to this battle at Point Mulate, there's questions of the issue of what's the value of Winehaven? What would be historic preservation at Winehaven, since there's interest in doing that. And I think that's also a really good community-wide discussion. Does the community want to fund a $50 to $100 million in retrofit or renovation of Winehaven, or something less? Would the community rather put in $100 million into investing in downtown Richmond versus historic renovation of Winehaven? I think public discussion about that issue would also be part of a process. If the Park District was able to purchase and take ownership of the land, and have the public really give input into what would be a use for Winehaven, how much should be spent on renovation. There are people who've proposed a $50 to $100 million renovation. And I've heard from other residents who say, I'd rather put $100 million into downtown Richmond. So I think, you know, those are questions. And the other question that gets asked is this issue of housing, and what would the public support out there? The reason there's been a great coalition to create a regional park there is to have this property be open to all Richmond residents and East Bay residents with activities that Richmond residents want. And 1,500 luxury homes near the Chevron refinery. And I serve on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District Board. 1,500 homes next to the Chevron refinery is not a good public health decision. There's a reason that many years ago, Chevron offered to pay $80 million to buy that land. This is when the city was considering a casino many years ago, former city council. They offered to spend $80 million to buy the land and to have a portion of it be open space. And at that time, the city council rejected that in favor of negotiating for a casino. If that decision had been made back then, we wouldn't be where we are today. I think Chevron understood that having, at that time, a casino or a lot of people next to a refinery didn't make sense from a public health standpoint. As an air quality regulator that just passed the toughest pollution controls on Chevron over Chevron's objection, that's also not a good public health decision. When the Air District does an health analysis of impacts of industrial facilities, we look at what we call the sensitive receptors, or people, schools, parks, in a sense of where do you locate a park that's going to also be away from a facility, which is why the shoreline, as opposed to further up where the homes were going to be, and having people live there. Air quality analysis looks at how many hours a day are you spending at a particular location. And if you're spending all day at a home and your exposure all day, every day over time, that's a greater impact to you than an occasional exposure. So all of those are considered. And so from a public health standpoint, homes where people are living full time next to industrial facilities doesn't make a lot of public health sense, and also why there are buffers between industry and housing. Now, the voters of Richmond, remember, overwhelmingly voted down a casino at Point Melati, and where the proponents of the casino believed there would be economic benefit to the city, hundreds of jobs. 1,500 homes doesn't bring hundreds of jobs. And the argument that was the argument against the casino prevailed. And what I've heard from many Richmond residents is, what value do we get from 1,500 high-priced homes next to a casino? And that's why, can we do more soccer fields? Can we do more facilities for residents of Richmond who could use that facility? And that's, I think, a process that the Park District would go through to understand what to do out there. So I think those are some of the issues that I know they have followed when they've looked at other types of areas for parks. So Norman, what would you consider to sort of be, and then we'll wrap up here to go to questions, what would you consider to be one of the major sort of successes in the Bay Area that you've seen on open space battles?
Well, that's a big question, John.
Or one of your favorite.
Well, I have to say, there's a few.
And just a brief answer, then we'll go to questions.
McLaughlin, Eastshore State Park, but also there's the committee to complete the refuge to save the wetlands in the South Bay from the salt pans of Cargill. Another one is what was done to save West Marin,
yeah,
and the creation of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area through
which was going to be housing. That was going to be a lot of housing out there, right?
Marin Shallow, yes, and that was absolutely critical. I think Tesla in Eastern Alameda County is also critical. And frankly, just the fact that the voters of the East Bay have repeatedly supported the East Bay Regional Park District's bond measures for parks and acquisition.
Great. Okay. So
thank you, John. Thank you, John and Norm, for that great talk. And Pam Stello is going to be handling the question and answer period today. So Pam, take it away.
Okay, thank you. So please use your electronic hand option to raise your hand. I will call on participants with their electric hand raised. If you're on the phone, you would use 6 to mute and unmute, and 9 for raise hand. I'm actually unable to turn on my video, otherwise I would.
So are you calling them? You're calling on folks?
Yeah, we have a question now from Virginia.
Okay.
Thank you. Virginia?
Hi, Virginia.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi. Well, thank you both for making this announcement, which is so exciting and really remarkable news. My question is, what can the community do to help get this park to the next phase? What's next in this process?
That's a great question. So I think, you know, obviously there is litigation currently going on with the city that will also go through a process. And I think the Park District is also very, how do I say this, experienced in working through issues like this. You know, there's been litigation tied up with other projects and properties that it eventually acquired. So I think it's been very experienced in dealing with this. And I did want to make one other comment. I think all of us wanted to see this done in a way that protects the city's financial interest and doesn't put the city at risk. Look, I've been in government a long time. We are always sued. You know, for those who claim every lawsuit, I want to address this because there are people who say, oh, the city's going to go bankrupt. You know how many times I've heard that threat used against the county with lawsuits? So I think we have to be aware that often that is a scare tactic that is used to get people to make decisions. When I passed gun control regulations, we were always sued and claiming the county is going to spend a lot of money. Air District sued when it passes air quality regulations. So I think that's a part of this. But I think we're all conscious of making sure that a solution protects the city's financial status. That is really important. So I think the public, I think first being engaged and being informed is always a good start. Nothing is happening fast here because ultimately the time it would take to go through a process of negotiating to buy the property with additional funding that the Park District's going to get. I'm very confident of that, substantially more, that the public want to have a voice with the Park District on what should occur out there, where the public gives input into what type of vision, specific vision they have for a regional park that meets the needs of Richmond and area residents. So I think that is a great way, and obviously to continue to advocate for openness and transparency with that process. The litigation is going to take some time, but there's others better informed than I. Maybe we'll call on him. I know Robert Cheasty's on, who followed this. There is a court hearing coming up that will determine a bit of this process. And so I think being aware and watching that court process is important. And to let your elected officials, public officials know how you feel about what you want to see out there in addition to the Park District. I think we all want to be advocates for what the public wants to see there. So I think that is important, and not to believe that things are a foregone conclusion. So be engaged, sign up, be informed, express your view of what you want to see out there, and continue to advocate to protect the interest of the city. I think that's important.
I would add to that, John, that I agree to everything you said. And I think a critical component is putting your elected officials' feet to the fire and making sure that they support creation of a true regional park at Point Melody. And no ifs, ands, buts, waffling.
Robert Cheasty?
Am I unmuted yet?
Yes.
Oh, well, first, this is a wonderful day. I mean, what the governor and Senator Skinner did in terms of the budget is just magnificent. It is allowing and empowering the Park District to pursue its goals. And I think that the Park District's goals have been set and established for decades now. I think this is a fantastic opportunity. Look, in the life of a public official, you don't always get to do a redo, like a do-over. There are lots of things that happen in parcels like shorelines that could have been done better with more thoughtful planning. And here we have an opportunity to redo what's happening out at Point Melody. I think that the fact that it's an extremely difficult parcel for the kind of proposal that had been suggested and where SunCal was recruited, the Southern California developer was recruited to come in and build the 1,500 homes or 1,400 homes. There's a huge amount of infrastructure that would need to be built to do that, maybe $300 to $500 million, and it makes the project unfeasible. And SunCal was unable to come up with and comply with its own contracts in purchasing the property. And so I think that this gives us a new opportunity to take a look at this. Now, I think it's important to treat people with respect in this process. SunCal spent money and they're going to have some arguments about getting repaid. Certainly the Giddevilles and Upstream spent money, and they had an expectation that had the property sale gone through, that they would have received some significant amounts of money. So, you want to treat people with respect and go through that whole process with them. And of course, that's something that will take time, as John pointed out. I thought that your introduction to this subject, John, was excellent. And Norman, thank you for giving a history of some of the harder projects. I personally think Point Melody has been one of the harder projects to get done. It's been more than 20 years that people have been fighting hard to get something done out there. And by something done out there, I'm not talking about this foolish idea of putting a bunch of luxury homes. I mean, getting an open park that people can use and enjoy, and having that available to an underserved population like Richmond is just a magnificent thing. This is no accident that the governor signed this bill. This fits exactly within the parameters of the 30 by 30, where you want to protect the shoreline and deal with sea rise problems, and also to attend to the needs of underserved communities like Richmond has been. This would be a wonderful, magnificent opportunity, even without any of that. But considering those factors, this makes Point Melody an incredible opportunity for the entire region to do something right. I think Senator Skinner, her comment was the best I heard as to why she did this. And she said, because it was the right thing to do. And that's what how we should approach this. There's litigation coming. And of course, litigation goes on until it gets resolved one way or the other. And I think cooler heads will come together and try to figure out what's a good way to resolve all of this litigation and produce some kind of public benefit. And that's going to happen. How long that's going to take and how much money that's going to take, we don't know, but there has to be money left over for developing the park. So this is not all money will be spent on acquisition. It can't be. But I think there's plenty of money there to do some justice. And I'm really looking forward to working with everybody to see this happen.
Thank you. Don Gosney?
Hey, Don, we can't hear you.
Couldn't hear me because the host would not unmute me.
Okay.
Not our
Okay.
choice. They finally did, though. Thank you very much. How much have we heard of these past several years about the secret backroom dealings with some of our elected officials and their friends about the disposition of Point Melati? So how is this any different than that? Was the public ever made aware so they could advise our elected officials about our wants and wishes? When and where were the public meetings? Where was the outreach? Were the local online newspapers or the numerous social media sites used to get the word out about Senator Skinner and her friends' plans? And for those people that are pushing this, that think that they can speak for the people of Richmond without really speaking to them, the East Bay Parks people don't send out press releases about this, but it's an understood thing that the East Bay Regional Parks routinely ask the voters for more funding so they can purchase private land to be used for parks, but they don't really have the funds to actually turn these lands into parks. Ask the parks people how many thousands, how many tens of thousands of acres of land they're just sitting on because they don't have the funds to develop it. While their goal may be to turn this land into parks, right now their goal is to ensure that private owners don't develop this property. They want to preserve the open space with the hope that someday in the future. Sorry?
Yeah, and I'm glad to respond. So, I served on the East Bay Mud Board for 10 years. And, East Bay Mud, between East Bay Mud and East Bay Regional Park District, we have an amazing amount of open space in the East Bay that is open and available to the public. And the Park District, with the money that it's received from residents, from taxpayers, has built, a park at Point Pinole, at Bruner Marsh, at Miller Knox, at Point Isabel, at Wildcat Canyon, at Tilden Park. I mean, think of all those examples of open space that we all enjoy. I think they have an amazing track record. And yes, there's sometimes a time frame between when they acquire and when it is finally implemented, because it costs money to build out and then maintain the park. I've just cited a number of examples of parks that are open today to residents of West Contra Costa County, including the area behind me. And so I think I agree with the notion that we should hold the Park District accountable to work with the community about what would be out there, which is frankly way more accountability you'll get than a developer planning homes. Come on, let's be real. A developer got to decide in whatever process that happened, I wasn't involved in that, to build these 1,500 homes and to set aside land along the shoreline. The public really didn't have a lot of input into that. We will have an opportunity, and I will hold the Park District accountable. I live in Richmond. I talk to Richmond residents all the time who tell me, we don't want to see 1,500 high-priced homes there. We'd rather have all of it be available to the public. I've heard that. Now, I'm sure we've heard people who want to have 1,500 homes. I think, the voters, 75% of voters in Richmond voted for the Park District to spend $4 to $5 million on shoreline at Point Melati. I mean, over 55%, was it 57% of voters voted against a casino at Point Melati that was led by the city of Richmond. So I think there's an opportunity here to make sure the public voice is there. Don, I totally agree with you. I know you grew up in Richmond and you keep an eye on council meetings. So moving forward, I always prefer moving forward. There is an opportunity for all of us. And I think on one of these conversations to get Elizabeth Eccles, our elected park director, here and express to her how you feel and what you would expect her to do if the Park District were in control of these properties. I'll say this, I'd rather have a public agency like the Park District in control of what happens on that property than a real estate developer.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. This has been close to a 25-year campaign. If anything has been public, it's been very public as to what the community wants, not as to what certain members of the city council wanted and negotiated in backroom deals, and particularly the mayor. So there's been clear community consensus that Point Melati should be saved as a park and open space area. things that is incredible about that is that both under Measure Double C of the Park District and Measure Double F, which extended Measure Double C for this area of the East Bay Regional Park District, that is from Oakland up through Richmond, the voters supported that overwhelmingly, and that includes money for operations of a regional park at Point Mulati. And lastly, one of the things that has been one of the most impressive components of the East Bay Regional Park District over the years is its incredible ability to leverage money. It can take money that it has and double, triple, quadruple, actually 10 times that through its ability to go to other funding sources. And that's been one of the reasons why the Park District has been so successful, as John has said, in opening up and creating not only the parks, but access to the parks.
Yeah, and that's why I think that 36 million, that's a start, right? And no one expects that that's the final amount, that the additional money from Park District that it's already allocated from other federal and state sources, in addition to private sources, as I say, I think discussions with Chevron will be fruitful. And so I think there are opportunities. And look, I know this conversation was really focused on the history of open space movement, but we wanted to a little bit address what happened today in, to start that. But I know Pam will work, on these conversations. I think having a whole session on exactly the issues that people here have raised today would make total sense. There's no decisions being made right now, right? Today was just was major progress along the way, and to get the Park District here and to talk more about what a process and a pathway would look like. That, I think that makes total sense in responding, Dawn, to your question, so that there indeed is public input and accountability. And I understand there's a lot of people on this issue who believe that even the decisions of the city council, and I'm just talking all prior iterations of the city council and current, it hasn't been as open and public as it should be. I mean, I think that's part of it, is people need to hold everyone accountable. The litigation makes that harder. But don't let someone tell you that, well, we have to do something or we're going to go bankrupt. That is just absolutely not true. I've been on the board of a county agency that has a AAA credit rating. We are well managed. I understand fiscal policies. Richmond's not going to go bankrupt as a result of a lawsuit like this. Now, it is all our job to be protective, to ensure that the money is used to help protect Richmond. And that is why I think this initial allocation is really significant and historic and a good start. And I think gives us hope for the community to have input into what should be out there in a democratic way.
So thank you, John, and thank you, Norman, for this wonderful presentation and for answering questions so thoroughly. And thanks to everyone for joining us. Please tune in next week for another exciting presentation of Speaking Up for Point Mulati. Next week is Jim Hansen, and then August 1st is the Watershed Project. So I appreciate everyone who came, and I'm sorry that we didn't get to deal with all the questions, but it's been wonderful to have such a big audience this time. Thanks very much.
Yeah.